Hello, and thank you for your interest in listening to the Evolutionary Service Group, the Scientific Workers podcast. In today's world, the scientist is involved in analysis, interpretation of results, observation, and data collection, and conducts experiments to test a hypothesis, formulates research questions, and develops methodologies in addition to collaboration with fellow scientists and mentoring. In essence, science is the systematic and intelligent observation of an object or activity. Scientific workers do their work by exploring God's manifestation in all its fullness by applying a mental understanding of universal concepts. On a practical level, a scientist's physical purpose is about penetrating secrets behind the outer form to reveal its core motivating energy as it relates to life. At their core, scientific workers will reveal the essential spirituality of all scientific work, which is motivated by the love of humanity and its welfare. This group relates the fields of science with religion and brings light through the medium of God's tangible world and His works. For this service group, the scientific workers, there will be 2 podcasts examining their role, activities, and their focus in how they will contribute to civilization in the Aquarian Age. And we'll start with the subject of observing human evolution. Since Darwin, science has widely held the belief that human evolution took place only through the physical environment. The scientists of the New Age will study evolution and understand how individuals and groups are evolving through all levels of cosmic, energetic, physical plane. And this can be observed through their behavior within civilization. Evolution will be expanded to understand that man will evolve through his consciousness. This will embrace the awareness that man can learn to master his lower mental, emotional, and physical nature and evolve not just in his consciousness, but demonstrate control of the emotions and the physical form. This would be an unbiased observation of the evolutionary steps man makes as he's evolving while determining what he is evolving towards and becoming. The scientists could also work together with members of the psychologist service group. Here, the scientists would study societies and cultures around the world and identify how the awakening process of soul contact and integration affects people. They will study the subjective nature of how the monad, our pure spirit, expresses through what is called in the Ageless Wisdom teachings the spiritual triad. It is made up of the 3 energies of spirit, Atma, pure will, buddhi, pure love, reasoning, and intuition, and manas, or higher mind. The soul acts as an intermediary in human evolution between the spiritual triad and the lower threefold personality, that is, the lower mental, emotional, physical, in which we move and have our own being. The scientists of the future could observe these energies as light from the soul and study how each of the different cosmic influences influence individual groups, nations, and civilizations as a whole. Let's turn to the subject of the concept of the soul. This subject is deeply rooted in various philosophical, religious, and spiritual traditions and has been the subject of inquiry and debate for millennia. Different cultures and belief systems have their own interpretations of the soul, ranging from the fundamental essence of individual identity to a transcendent, eternal aspect of consciousness. From the current scientific perspective, the existence of the soul is not something that can be empirically proven or disproven using current methods and frameworks of scientific inquiry. The notion of the soul falls outside the scope of empirical observation and experimentation as it pertains to metaphysical and existential questions beyond the domain of physical reality. However, throughout history, many individuals have reported profound spiritual experiences, mystical insights, and near-death encounters that they interpret as evidence of the existence of the soul or a higher spiritual reality. These subjective experiences have contributed to the enduring belief of the soul across cultures and civilizations. Whether or not the soul will be discovered and recognized in a universally accepted manner depends on various factors, including advances in consciousness studies, neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy. As our understanding of the mind-body relationship continues to evolve, there may be new insights and perspectives that shed light on the nature of consciousness and its relationship to the concept of the soul. Ultimately, questions about the soul are deeply personal and often intersect with matters of faith, spirituality, and existential inquiry. Recognition of the soul may ultimately be a matter of individual interpretation and belief rather than a scientific discovery in the conventional sense. Let's turn to talking about the scientific study of the chakras and the etheric system of man. For this type of inquiry to happen, the scientist must first recognize the fact of the soul and its influence on the chakras and the etheric body, and recognize the etheric energy as a substance or matter that makes up the energy of the chakra. From various spiritual sources, such as Hindu, Theosophical, and others, we understand that the etheric body is the energy or vital vehicle which interpenetrates and corresponds to the dense physical body. It is a finer level of matter than the dense physical form and has 7 major chakras or energy centers, each of which gives us vitality, energy, and life. The chakras correspond approximately to the nervous system and the ductless glands, which maintain our life processes. From the spiritual viewpoint, the etheric body is given life in the dense physical world via the Sutratma, or the life thread, originating from the soul and monad. The chakras are formed entirely of streams of force pouring down from the soul and act as a conduit via the life thread from the monad, and they are connected by the will aspect of the monad, that is, the will to live. The etheric body receives and distributes force from many directions, such as from prana, impressions, and from the abstract mind of the soul, and also psychic impressions or thought forms, and from others through telepathy. The centers are focal points of energy located in the etheric body. Chakras or centers act as transmitters of certain forms of energy consciously directed by the soul with the intent of driving the physical body to fulfilling its purpose. The everyday man is beginning to function through the solar plexus center. This is a process that transfers energy and force from the centers below the diaphragm to the centers above the solar plexus. The whole process is one of development, use, and transference. Scientists will observe the evolution of the chakra system in the etheric body and the soul-infused disciple in the Aquarian age. For the head, or the head center, via the Antakarana, or the rainbow bridge connecting the lower personality with the soul, this links the personality to the monadic expression impressed with the energy of the creative will and divine purpose. So in essence, when we as personalities, we go into meditation, we visualize a connection between our mind, the lower mind, concrete mind, and the soul, and we go across that, we go through the soul, and we visualize a connection with that higher spiritual set part of ourself known as manas, which is the highest aspects of the soul. Therefore, we are open to connecting with the spiritual triad. Disciples and initiates understand that and are aware that the head center is the locus of shambhalic energies of will as reflected upon the physical plane. Regarding the head center, all scientific breakthroughs as they enter manifestation will pass through and be embodied and expressed with love, wisdom, the energy of love, wisdom of the divine. Herein lies the possibility of connecting with the spiritual masters and their energy releases via impression onto the physical plane into man's mind. This will enable man to carry out service-related activities for manifesting and enabling the divine plan. The scientific servers will also identify and describe and analyze man's capacity for creating thought forms. This will be an understanding that man's ideals and ideas are made up of energetic thought. The scientists will learn how these are formed from the finer matter of etheric energy. So regarding the throat chakra, this allows the thought form and desire energy to be visualized and created via the concrete mind into manifestation. So it's important to understand there's a relationship of the chakras in relation to our consciousness. So therefore, like if there's a certain energy from the desire nature, which is essentially located typically in the sacrum, this energy can be moved up to the throat and cause a dissipation to take place. This, of course, can be witnessed and documented ultimately. And like I say, it would allow the thought form and desire energy to be visualized and changed via the concrete mind into a different form or manifestation. So also thoughts flowing from the creative mind or the conceptual mind will impress themselves on human consciousness as ideas and subsequently evolve into material form. So as much as an individual gets an impression from, say, the soul or from a master, etc., then he or she would be able to transform that energy in the mind and into a creative material form. There would also be the carrying out of the soul intent through the will to good, and it's tested in time again through the inventions and creations via the throat center. So again, the energy would be moved up, you get an impression, you move the energy from the conceptual mind up to the throat center, and you can speak it out, you can speak with words, you can identify it, you can have creative consciousness and visualization in your consciousness by doing this. So at times, the disciple, the individual, must confront and remove any blockages for clear seeing and knowing. So this individual will learn how to do this over time, and this all can be all documented and then learn to control this aspect and this energy within consciousness. Talk about the sacral center now. Which is aligned with the throat center, as I mentioned before. This energy challenges man to choose its creative expression through the will to good over aggressive behavior and selfish motivations. So scientists will identify and demonstrate that an individual must step away from the selfish and aggressive existence promulgated by sexual instinct and energy. So this is referring to the raw sexual energy that comes from the sacral center, which it doesn't have to be, there's no good or bad about it. It's just simply that raw energy. And oftentimes with the solar plexus, that energy becomes aggressive and it becomes selfish, and the person acts out on their whim as opposed to being conscious about how to use that raw energy. For the individual whom is spiritually aware, such as in meditation, he must come to learn and understand that the raw sexual energy of creation of the sacral center, in combination with the throat center for creativity, would raise the vibration of the energy to a more conscious use. And from this study, scientists will work with members of psychologists service group in identifying processes and energy activity in the chakras as the personality and the soul learn to integrate and fuse. This observation will allow the scientist to be a witness to the evolutionary process in man. For any anomalies, remedies can be prescribed for facilitating greater integration with the soul. In today's world, at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, known as IONS, Dr. Dean Radin, for example, has been studying how consciousness affects the human mind and how it interacts with the physical world. His work involves the role of consciousness and meditation in healing, and laboratory research on the effects of mind and matter interactions. Overall, the New Age scientists will help to understand and define the existence of subjective and etheric worlds and how the soul interacts with it. This would provide an understanding that the etheric body is a reflection of the soul in man, and it links the physical form with the higher Atma, or the aspect of will, the astral or the emotional body with Buddhi from the intuitional plane, and a connection with the mental or manas of the spiritual triad. When the individual becomes completely soul infused, that is, deep meditation and connecting with the soul and becoming the soul, connections can become possible to the higher planes in consciousness. It is instructive for esoteric students to study the forces and energies which interact through the etheric field and cause the physical form, the brain and consciousness to be energized into action. The spiritual worker should learn to subjugate the emotional body and develop his mental powers and cultivate the faculty of abstract thinking. These actions will over time achieve positive results upon the etheric body and thus eliminate any premature awakening of the centers. In this work, scientists are taking steps to study the nature of consciousness and meditation about how it works with healing in a subjective reality. I'd now like to make some comments on the effects of consciousness and religion. The work of the scientist is closely connected with the energy of synthesis for very practical and physical purposes. This work is intended to produce a synthesis between the three aspects of divinity, known as the Atma, the Buddhi, and the Manas. The Atma being will, Buddhi being the intuition or the high reasoning capacity, and of course Manas being the mind, the thinking capacity, upon the physical plane or between life and the energies of the soul. So we're talking about how synthesis works by bringing all these aspects together, and the scientists will study this information. With regards to understanding the dynamics and forces behind the creative impulse, scientists will come to discover who is the destroyer of an outgrown form and learn to penetrate what is behind the outer form to discover its motivating energy. Here, the scientists will study the nature of consciousness as it destroys a form. And so they're going to understand also why was this form destroyed and what is it turning into. This knowledge would reveal the practical work of the magician or the builder who creates new forms as expressions of the inflowing life of the soul or the master. From this awareness, the scientists will come to understand religion, or the aspiration to connect with the divine, is connected with the awakening to conscious purpose of the soul in man or in form. So religion would help, or a spiritual understanding would help to understand how the energies of aspiration in connecting with the soul will help to connect also with the divine. While science is concerned with the activity of the outer form as it lives its own life, the form nature becomes slowly subservient to the purposes of the soul impulse. So, in other words, the soul will be influencing how the form looks, and ultimately, when deeper connections in consciousness established with the soul, the person, the individual who is meditating, who aligns with the soul, becomes the soul, he or she would be creating more beauty and therefore influencing the matter from that point of view. And from these inferences, scientists will formulate those forms of service on the physical plane which will precipitate the plan into manifestation. From this, they will relate the subhuman lives, that is, Davic, to the human through the right interplay of forces. After the fact of the soul is acknowledged and the externalization of the hierarchy has begun, the impact of these transformative energies on matter will be radically altered, because they will be, for the first time in history, be directed from etheric levels from the Buddhic plane of the intuition, which is the lowest form of cosmic etheric levels. At that time, detailed and focused direction will be given for transforming the lower three worlds, that is, the mental, emotional, and the physical plane. So let's turn now to the tasks in the Aquarian age of the scientific servers. The Master DK specifies 3 major tasks to be accomplished by this group in the Aquarian era. The first major task cannot be performed until a certain scientific discovery has been made, that is, recognizing the fact of the soul as a creative factor. From this revelation will reveal the essential spirituality of all scientific work, which relates science and religion, and through the medium of God's tangible world and works. The discovery will produce a synthesis between the 3 aspects of divinity on the physical plane, or between life, the solar energies, and other energies which influence man's personality and his dense physical form, such as even from the moon. The moon energies affect our emotions on very subtle levels. With the fact of the soul established, it would also follow that a study of consciousness would become a subject of major scientific inquiry, including establishing a relationship between spirit and matter as a factor in thinking and perception. The second major task for the scientific to work in would be concerned with relating the fields of science with religion by studying the problem of evil and come to a greater understanding as to its purpose residing in matter and through the medium of the tangible world of God's works. From Alice Bailey's book, Externalization of the Hierarchy, the Master DK says, "Scientific workers will make a close study of the problem of evil, and they will bring about a better understanding of the purpose existing in matter or substance and the inflowing, enlightened, and different purpose of the soul aspect." From an esoteric viewpoint, Helena Blavatsky, the co-founder of Theosophy in the 19th century, tells us that evil provides the necessary force and energy for the process of evolution to take place. She argued that good and evil, light and darkness, are dual aspects of the one absolute reality, and that evolution could not manifest or evolve without both forces being present. Blavatsky proclaimed that esoteric philosophy shows that man is truly the manifested deity in both its aspects, good and evil. In the history of our world, there are numerous examples of individuals who have manifested large-scale evil for selfish and harmful ends. However, those individuals or groups can ultimately turn this evil toward aspiration, towards spiritual growth, and human evolution towards enlightenment. While there have been many people from theological, academic, and philosophic viewpoints who have examined this question, they have only examined it from the point of duality and the cruelty inflicted. For the New Age scientist, a major task would be to study matter at the etheric level and discover its motivating energy as an expression of the inflowing cosmic life. With this study, greater depths in the solar life will be further revealed. A deep study in the nature of evil will reveal an awareness about the inflowing life energies of the soul and its effects on dense matter up to the etheric substance, and a full acknowledgement of the influence of subjective energies and forces that affect mankind. The scientist studies the form and its activities, whereas religion studies the soul in form. And this will bring together members of the scientific and religious communities. Studies in the field of consciousness and the subjective realms will reveal a connection between human behavior, environmental conditions, and genetics. And these studies in psychology, heredity, and genetics would help in determining whether certain personality traits, both dark and light, are passed down from the parents to the child, just as we know about how hair and eye color are passed down to the child. In the same vein, studies in behavioral genetics reveals that personality traits such as antisocial behavior could possibly also be passed down through genetic inheritance. This will lead man into the world of meaning and prepare him to live more conscious spiritual life. For those scientists involved with the science of consciousness as it affects the human mind, they will collaborate with psychologists in understanding the existence of the nature of subjective and etheric worlds. With these discoveries, the scientists will be able to work with advanced thinkers and help create new hypotheses for identifying the next steps forward in any field of service. Through systematic and intelligent observation, they can study the motivating energy that penetrates the outer form and discover the one who creates the new forms as an expression of the inflowing spiritual life. This activity allows the scientist to act as a communicator between the human spirit and the energies and forces which make up the forms. From their observations, they'll be able to relate the subhuman kingdoms, that is, the deva and elemental, and create an understanding about how these various forces and energies work together. Scientific worker will relate the subhuman kingdoms with the human kingdom through a right interplay of forces via meditation. The scientist, through the use of his intuition, will enter into the new realm of thought to better understand the building forces of the universe. This will allow him to bridge the abstract mind via the intuition while connecting with the Buddhic or intuitional plane and acknowledge the factual existence of the soul and the etheric body. The scientists in the Aquarian era will also study how the inflowing, illumined purpose of the soul aspect can transform evil within substance. Such a study could also include understanding the dynamics of how crisis, distress, and catastrophe influence world civilization. When the building forces of the universe are better understood, the result will be expanded etheric vision for directly knowing an object or a process. This will open intersubjective connections, for example, building the antakarana or bridge from the lower mind to the higher mind of the soul. And this break and limitation in consciousness has been hindered in humanity's approach to connecting with the hierarchy. The third major task for the scientists in the Aquarian era is about the subject known as spiritual approach. From Alice Bailey's book, Externalization of the Hierarchy, the Master DK comments, scientists will study the nature of the incoming forces during the time of spiritual approaches. They will understand the basics of how these energies and forces interact in our world through people and the environment. Scientists will conduct studies around the spiritual approaches by deity, or God, particularly at the time of the new and the full moons. The scientists of the New Age will describe the nature of the incoming and subjective forces that influence humanity and civilization from the spiritual masters. Their studies would reveal forms of service on the physical plane to facilitate the plan in manifesting and identify any intellectual impediments from fully comprehending any approach or the inner worlds. This will demonstrate the divine quality of the forces in nature and humanity and the correct methods for using these forces by humanity for divine purposes. From this work, we can understand also they would work with the psychologists to understand how these dynamics work and then make this a teaching. The scientists will derive spiritual inferences from the nature of those forces to those forms of service on the physical plane which will precipitate with rapidity the plan for the immediate present. Using the intuition, they will blend scientific knowledge with those energies that will further human interests and relate the subhuman kingdoms to the human. By identifying the right interplay of forces, this can help to understand and clear any subjective impediments which have blocked man's approach to the inner plane's work. We'll turn now to the study of reincarnation and the evolution of man. For the scientist in the New Age, he will observe reincarnation as a process that man goes through on the path of evolution. They can study reincarnation and the law of rebirth by analyzing the energies and forces of the outer garment of form and how it relates to the transformation of forms. This problem deals with the object taking a certain outer garment, then it is reduced or transformed into another form altogether. Hence, he will discover the motivating energy that penetrated the outer form and the one who creates the new forms as an expression of the inflowing spiritual life. The example of the atomic bomb as the outer appearance. When the bomb explodes, it releases light and radiation into the world and converts the elements in the bomb to other forms. This is a form of rebirth of one form to another. As the scientist studies reincarnation and evolution, he will observe the path of evolution by studying what evolves in man. And this will be an observation of the matter, the chakras, and the lower threefold nature, mental, emotional, physical, and how its vehicles evolve. The soul inhabits the physical etheric vehicle through solar, light, and radiation. When the personality in the physical etheric body dies, the solar and radiatory light of the soul withdraws. The scientist will identify and observe this process. Scientists will observe how energy and light affects, releases, and transforms the lesser lives, that is, the devas and the elementals, from the form. The Ageless Wisdom teachings describe how the human soul is drawn to rebirth by the desire for perfection. It senses the perfection of the pure spirit, or of the monad, which it desires to acquire, experience, and full awareness in the densest forms. The scientist will eventually understand and observe that the soul reincarnates, choosing and building suitable physical, emotional, and mental vehicles through which the personality learns the needed lessons. If perfection is not achieved in a particular life, then the soul must return through earthly incarnations and continue the process of releasing the emotional energies. Reincarnation will be studied to discover how karma and its subsequent effects on the physical, etheric, and mental sheaths, or vehicles. This would become a study of man learning right relationships with his fellow brothers and sisters, including the lower kingdoms of the physical plane, with the soul, and with the hierarchy. The soul gleans and stores experience through its causal body, or the body of the soul. It is through the development of the mind and a perfected emotional nature that wisdom is acquired. The wisdom is eventually available to the monad. The scientists will also be studying the centers and their interconnectedness on health and personal psychology. For example, the sacral energy, so closely associated with the Lemurian consciousness and aligned with the throat center, provides a challenge for man to express the will to good and disassociate from the selfish sexual instinct and energy. The sacral energy from the second center provides a drive for regeneration linked to reincarnation. When motivated by spiritual awareness, the sacral energy redirects the sexual regenerative energy for creation and expression through the throat center. This creative energy can be in the form of art, building structures, the drive or creative spark for making the project work out. This concludes the first of 2 podcasts on the service workers in the scientific field.